Hello and welcome. Today I'm just north of Nordhausen in Germany. This is the concentration camp of Mittelbau Dora, and I'm going to take you for a little walk around it. I'll tell you something about the history. Obviously, when I do something like this, I'm speaking off the top of my head, so I can make mistakes, or I can say things and not realize what I've said until afterwards, a slip of the tongue or something like that. And so I hope you'll understand that. However, the great thing about doing things online as opposed to doing them in print is you can correct yourself, and there's a pinned comment below, and in the pinned comment I can put my mistakes. So this is located in Thuringia, formerly part of East Germany. If you look at a map, Nordhausen is almost in the geographical center of Germany. I know it's difficult to put a geographical center of Germany because of its funny shape. It's much longer on its western side than it is on its eastern side. But approximately, you can't get much further from a border, let's say, than it. Approximately. Anyway, in 1939, the borders were different. And of course, it was a bit further. It wasn't quite in the geographical center, but it was quite some distance from a potential threat. And that is why this location was chosen to be an oil storage depot for the Wehrmacht, buried under a hill. Sometimes heard it called a mountain. You can tell me if it looks like a mountain when you see it. We have some things which remind us of the past here. We've got this gate up here. We've got the road. I don't know if this was built by the prisoners. In many cases, though, this type of road was built by prisoners. Here, KZ, concentration camp, a memorial location. And there you can see the tunnels in this photograph. And you'll see where the tunnel was in this video. So you can see where the tunnel is, but you can't see the entrance. And with this part as well, clearly from the National Socialist period. And here you go, Zorge Bridge. A feeder track of the state railway system led to the camp's industrial railroad station by way of a bridge over the river Zorge. Initially, SS transported inmates from other concentration camps to Camp Dora by lorry. After the industrial railway station was completed in the spring of 1944, inmate transports arrived by rail. Tens of thousands of concentration camp inmates crossed the river Zorge via this railway bridge, riding in goods and cattle wagons. Transports from Camp Dora to the Mittelbau concentration camp subcamps likewise took this route. The tracks were dismantled in the early 1950s, leaving only the bridge piers. So let's go and have a look at where the railway line was. No, it was taken down in the mid-1950s. And that was before the railway lines started being dug up. And this is clearly recent, done for the memorial which we find here, because the museum is effectively a memorial. And let's have a look at the bridge over here. Now, I started off at the railway line because for me that's usually what we think about with concentration camps, the delivery of prisoners via rail. Well, we can't see much from here, but at least this bit here is still here to remind us of what was once happening here. So the prisoners from the spring of 1944 came in this way, but not the first prisoners. They came by lorry, and there wasn't many of them, so it wasn't many lorries. So I can talk a little bit, I think, about the camp itself and what it is. So, so this was established in the summer of 1943. The reason, it's often said, was because of the bombing raid on Peenemünde. And I know that I've said that in videos, but having said that, I'm beginning to doubt that idea. And that was, it's only just, I say I'm beginning, it was only after I was preparing myself to come here, and I was listening to Albert Speer, his book, Inside the Third Reich, and I thought, perhaps it isn't after all what it is about these the V weapons. Now, the V weapons, Hitler had this idea that if he could destroy London or do so much damage, the British people would want peace. And as a result of this demand for peace, then he could concentrate on the Soviet Union. He was completely forgetting that by this time, Germany itself was being absolutely pounded by weaponry, by bombing raids. So the idea of his for these V weapons, revenge weapons, he really strongly believed in it. Now, I can't say that the V weapons were something that Hitler himself dreamt up. Here's the continuation of the railway line, and we'll walk over this way. The reason I'm doing this is because that dog was barking at me earlier, and whereas I like dogs, I don't want to end up in a situation filming me getting bitten. So there was the bombing raid on Peenemünde, which destroyed the facilities of the camp there, and so therefore almost immediately it was Hitler himself who appears to have ordered Himmler to use concentration camp workers to prepare a new facility for the camp itself. And that dog shouldn't be doing that to me. It should. It doesn't look very friendly. And it's a Labrador too. Anyway, so it was the Wirtschaftliche Forschungsgesellschaft, or WIFO, which had built the oil facility here. Oh, the dog's having another go. And so this subterranean fuel location had almost been finished by the time that the Peenemünde raid took place. So it was using an existing facility at this camp. Now, one of the people most important in this, of course, is Albert Speer. So it's the three of Albert Speer, Himmler, and Karl Sau agreed to found a company called the Mittelwerk GmbH, and that also brought in Hans Kammler on the board, a rather mysterious character whose post-war fate has caused a lot of interest. And I'll have to do a video on him one day. And the thing is, I don't know where he is. I'm going to point that out quite clearly. I don't know what happened to him. Another person brought in was Helmut Bischoff. He'd been a member of the Gestapo, and he ended up here. So it does not know exactly somebody who was a technical person who knew about technical matters. So the initial contract was for 12,000 rockets to be built here at this location, and they were for firing largely at London. Now, as far as this weapon is concerned, this is a strategic weapon. Its only one use that I know of in a tactical sense was following the capture of the Remagen Bridge on the 7th of March 1945. There was a shot, one was fired from Holland, or Netherlands, occupied Netherlands, at the Remagen Bridge, and that, it fell about 200 metres short, but in my opinion that's pretty accurate for the time, but it clearly couldn't hit something like a bridge, which in all honesty is not much wider than the road you can see I'm walking down right now. As you come into this camp, I mean, I think obviously it's not part of the decoration with all of these hay rolls, but I think it looks quite dramatic as one comes in. To the right here now, obviously we've got these former buildings. Here's a memorial to the Death March, and so I'm not doing this in order, I'm just chronological order, we'll do it in order. Things up here, and here we can see, there we go, the prisoners from concentration camp Mittelbau Dora and the subcamps in April 1945. So you can see that as the Americans approached here in April of 1945, most of them in bulk were moved to the north and then to the northwest, but there was also people moved to the north. And let's not forget that the Soviets were coming in from the east, but they were some distance away, so people were also moved to the east as well. So the value of these rockets, I might point out as well, was the cost was 750 million Reichsmarks, was a standard price per unit. Hang on, that can't be right. No, sorry, it's 50,000 Reichsmarks per unit, and they wanted 12,000. That sounds about right. I think that's correct. No, it doesn't. Whatever, anyway, you got the general picture. When it comes to the time of doing a documentary video, I'll be able to not rely on things off the top of my head. But it was a huge amount of cash. Now, the tunnels were here at this location where we are now. So you see the photograph photographs, because there's quite a lot of them, of the Americans. It was filmed actually here, photographed here at this location. But in 1947, the Red Army blew up the entrance to the mine. So it's a mine, can I call it a mine, a tunnel, the entrance to the tunnels. So that's what it looks like. However, one can still get into the tunnels, but that is through another entrance, which was dug in 1995. At the same time, I'm going to show you now what was around here. So we've had a railway yard around here. So they, in that sign I spoke of, they talked of a professional railway yard, I think. But it was a railway infrastructure, as you'd expect with any other industrial location. And let's not forget that railway infrastructure is still being built today. It's one of the best ways of moving goods around, and I think in the last few years we've seen a bit of a resurgence of rail, and so these places are built. Many railway stations, if you look at them, there's far more rails than are needed for moving people around. The point of the railways initially was just to move coal around. Then somebody realized that people could be moved around, and that was a useful extra feature of them. So this area here was for the rail. But if you think about all the stuff that had to be brought in, not only the spare parts for the construction materials for digging the tunnels, because they still continued to build tunnels during this period, and but the weaponry as well. The explosive parts, all of this had to be brought in. So, coming back to the raid on Peenemünde. No, I'm going to show you the other tunnel first, then I'll talk about the raid on Peenemünde. I know because I can jump around a bit, and so that's why the advantage of me just sitting down and doing things slowly. But it's not the same as a live from the location. As I drove in here today, this is my second visit. I came here in 2004, so it's 20 years later. But what struck me about this is how attractive it is. I think the landscaping has been done here is absolutely outstanding. Now, when I came here the last time, it was weather somewhat similar to today's weather. It was also the same month, and didn't quite strike me the same. And I've still got the photographs of that visit. Anyway, so in 1995, a entrance tunnel was built here, and I'm sure there's very good reason for that. That would be maybe because that other one wasn't safe to build on. I noticed there's warnings up not to go on the slope above the tunnel, and you can see it's fenced off. In this video, we're not getting in the tunnels because they're closed. But I did get in them last time. But I only got in them last time because the person he ran after me and he sort of knew who I was, and so he showed me the tunnels. But I made an inquiry about the archival evidence, and then anyway, okay, I'll read this to you. I'll show you the tunnel and I'll read it to you. The tunnel complex in the Kohnstein was where concentration camp inmates were put to work assembling rocket weapons. Initially, the inmates were also housed inside the tunnels. The tunnel complex was under construction from 1936 onwards to serve as an underground oil depot for the Wehrmacht. In the autumn of 1943, the SS had more than 10,000 concentration camp inmates transferred from the tunnels into a rocket factory. The prisoners were accommodated inside the tunnels under appalling conditions. Several thousand of them died during the first few months alone. After the tunnel Mittelbau was complete, the surviving inmates were transferred to barracks. They nevertheless had to continue working underground. In 1947, Soviet occupying troops had the tunnel entrance dynamited. Tunnel entrances dynamited. The underground complex has been accessible through a new entrance since 1995, which you can see right here at the place I'm at right now. So we'll come out a bit now and have a walk around. It's a pity you couldn't get in the tunnel, actually. I'd rather hope that a tunnel visit would be possible, but it turns out it isn't. Now, on the subject of what's happened in the 20 years, there's a big museum's been built over there, because I remember when I was here the last time and asked about where the archive was held, and I reported to, I think it's the accommodation block, which I'll show you in a while. So anyway, we can come over here now, I think. Walk up. I try not to put cars in the videos. So anyway, there was the raid on Peenemünde, 17th of August 1943, 28th of August 43. The first 107 concentration camp prisoners arrived here by truck from Buchenwald, and so this was then a subcamp of Buchenwald called Arbeitslager Dora. On the 2nd of September there was 1,223 prisoners arrived, and then those had been working on the V weapons at Peenemünde were also sent here. Now if you look at the map, Peenemünde is on the coast. Now this had an advantage that if you want to start firing things, you could fire things into the sea. The disadvantage was, as was discovered on the 17th of August 1943, that it's pretty close to being a place where you can actually get bombed. So by the end of September there were around getting on for 7,000 people. Sorry, by the end of October it's getting on for 7,000 people, and by the end of the year 10,500 prisoners were working here. And you can imagine what that would have been like in the tunnels. And there's got some accounts written here about the air in the tunnels, how bad it was, and the conditions. Now, if people are supposed to be building these ultra complex weapons and they're treated like this, it's pretty stupid, really, because you want to treat the workers well. This, to one extent, goes in with Nazi mentality, there's one thing that happened above all at this camp, more than anything else. The prisoners who were the strongest were put on weapons construction. The people who were the weakest physically were those that were put on construction detail, which was the heaviest work. So in order to avoid the heavy work, you had to appear to be strong. I mean, in these tunnels, there was no toilets, for example. So you used buckets or whatever there was. So they were sleeping and living and working in the same position. And so in it wasn't until January of 44 the first barracks, people moved into the barracks. So those who were ill were sent to as far away as Majdanek, which is today on the other side of Poland, or sent to Bergen-Belsen. I don't know of anybody who actually survived. That probably were one or two. Anyway, Albert Speer came here on the 10th of December 1943. He saw the conditions. There are actually videos, documentary films, where you've got witnesses talking about Albert Speer and his visit. And there was one person, one of them, where he says that it's as though he just looked straight through the prisoners. He didn't see that the prisoners were actually there. Now, when he arrived, the place was littered with corpses. I mean, some of his staff apparently asked to have free time off, leave, to get over it. So this, I think, is something with Albert Speer. Most of us have read his book Inside the Third Reich, which is undoubtedly one of the I think it's one of the most important books as far as understanding the entourage around Hitler is concerned, and the infighting between various groups around him. But Albert Speer is everybody's favourite Nazi, without any doubt. That's what I did a video on once. And but it is it's the way he managed his PR after the war. So he's at Nuremberg and he sort of goes through the ritual of accepting things. But he went through a ritual of accepting things, and it was as though the prosecution got onto him and said, okay, right, well, he's all right, he'll help us, we'll go easy on him. And I think they did go easy on him. I think they went very easy on him. And when in his book, for example, I think that his book, they went incredibly, the people, historians at the time, went easy on him. I knew slightly Gitta Sereni, who wrote a book on Speer, and her book is in some ways slightly negative in parts, but in others it isn't. Okay, here we have a map of the area, and here you can see what we've walked here. So walked, there's the bridge over the river, we stood there, and so came over here. Here is the Bahnhof, the railway station, and okay, there are the tunnel entrances, and okay, there's the new building, which is the Dokumentationszentrum, documentation, and here is where the camp was. Now the SS barracks were down there, so that's where SS would be living, and now we're in the prisoner compound itself. So this is where we are, and so now it's strange actually that the SS, because normally in other camps such as Sachsenhausen, there's people living in there, or Ravensbrück. I think there's people living in the former SS buildings in Ravensbrück. I don't actually know, but it's used by the museum. But here it's gone. There's nothing there. You wouldn't know it was ever there, because these buildings were normally they were built to last. That is new. That was put up in 2005, so it wasn't here when I was here last time. And now we're in the prisoner area of the camp as such. And this is where in East German times they used to hold ceremonies and things. It's a narrow gauge railway track. Construction materials and supplies transported to the camp on this track. Now you've got there's the narrow gauge railway, and there it is over there. Whether or not this is a real narrow gauge railway from the time, I don't know, but it was here when I was here last time. This building here appears on diagrams of the camp as a prison. Indeed, there's a sign inside which I'll take you to, which gives the impression that this was used Stehbunker, so that standing bunker, and so it's belonging to the political department of the Gestapo, or Dunkelarrest, dark confinement, and this was something that happened in a number of camps. It happened also in the Soviet Union as well. But I think that's a mistake. I think that this is a air raid shelter, or a shelter for the SS. The same as, for example, you see the shelters which are at Auschwitz, which are placed around the camp. It looks as though the machine gun positions are pointing inwards, but I think they're shelters. And I think this is a shelter as well. Up there, you can see they've got a barracks, and which has been reconstructed. So a very large part of this was for the sick, which was up there. Anyway, here's the muster ground. I'll read it. You can have a look. The muster ground was the centre of the inmates' camp. It was here that every day before and after work the inmates had to line up for roll call. The roll calls were held regardless of the weather and often went on for hours. This daily exertion further weakened the already debilitated and inadequately clothed inmates. There was a gallows on the muster ground. Here the SS executed inmates they accused of sabotage activities or escape attempts. In the 1970s, the German Democratic Republic had the muster ground newly landscaped to serve as a square of honour for rallies on the speaker's platform, a bowl of flames, flagpoles and 21 stones of the nations. Right, here's a quote from somebody who was here. Pierre Machel, who's from France, I presume, or might be from Belgium. Roll call took far longer than usual this morning. A dead man whose number had been covered up had to be identified. As a result, 600 sick people had to remain standing for 4 hours. Now, this is quite common, this sort of stuff in here. You'll see this in other places like Buchenwald or Auschwitz. Those places were part of the socialist bloc, communist bloc, and so they put these things up to I think they put it up actually sort of to glorify their own system. Of course they used concentration camps and forced labour themselves, so a bit of hypocrisy really. You think of other people who were murdered by Stalin. Anyway, these blocks here, you could see them on the motorways, at least in Poland until even East Germany, they used the same blocks, the prefabricated blocks, and drive down, or clunk, 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 clunk. And in East Germany, former East Germany, I can't recall seeing them after 94, but certainly into the noughties, there were even the A4 to Wrocław from the German border had this type of system. And it was really impressive when I saw them digging it up, because the amount of work they had to do to smash up this 70-year-old motorway. And so it really was a tribute to the engineers who built it. This is a group down there. The first rocket that was delivered from here was taken out of the caves on the 1st of January 44. There was just 3 of them, and none of them worked. They all had defects, and so there was a problem with the SS, because they thought that the prisoners who had expanded the tunnels during the autumn winter 43-44 shouldn't be actually used on production, because they were probably too weak after all this work and not qualified. So then they started looking for other prisoners from other concentration camps, and so the other people therefore were just brought in. By the end of that month, January 44, 56 rockets had been produced, and by May they were knocking out 400 a month. Having said that, there were lots and lots of defects, blowing up in air if they ever took off at all, and this was, well below the 1,000 units a month that they're expected to actually produce. Now, Werner von Braun, later to be mates with President Kennedy, involved in the US space program, he came to Nordhausen on the 25th of January 44, and he was again on the 6th of May of that year. So he spoke to people here, and there it was decided, he was one of those who made this decision, that 1,800 skilled workers, and it took those workers came from France, needed to be brought here for slave labour. Right, the first V2 to hit London, if I remember my terms correctly, it was the 8th of September 1944. 600 units built in September of that year, and they managed to keep that up until February of 45. So this is the camp you can see here, and really this where the prisoners lived after a while. So it's about a kilometre or so from where the tunnels are, judging by the time I've been filming, something like that. And the prisoners here would work quickly building the camp, because it was in their interest to get out of the tunnels. And so there were also a number of subcamps. Elrich is probably the biggest one, but there's also Rottebrode, Hartzungen, amongst others. This is the Harz Mountains, this area here, which I've got to say is a very attractive area to visit. So we've got here the former barracks have been marked out where they actually stood. And I'll read this to you. There's a sign up here. This is an accommodation barrack. And this is a picture of it following the American liberation. The accommodation barracks were made of wood. The SS housed as many as 500 inmates in each of them. At first, the inmates were housed inside the tunnel complex. Later, the SS transferred them to makeshift prefabricated barracks. Each barrack consisted of 2 wings, each comprising 2 adjacent rooms. The first was furnished to serve as a dining room, while the second contained several multi-level wooden bunks. At the centre of the barrack were latrines and washing facilities that were frequently unusable. The hygiene conditions were appalling. The inmates' camp encompassed a total of 56 accommodation barracks, which were dismantled after the war, and only their foundations remain. So you can see here what they've done. Sorry. But they've actually marked them out very well with these white stones. It's really clear. There is Władysławski, and he said the following: in my barrack there were inmates from several different countries. When I say that there were around 400 to 500 inmates in there, I'm not exaggerating. We were 2 to 3 men to a bunk at first, but later 4 to 5, and we had to take turns. There was a day shift and a night shift. Imagine the bunk, how big the bunks are. It's just the same size as a normal, as a single bed is today. What is it, 90 centimeters across or something, or 70 centimeters, can't remember. Whatever, 70 I think it is. Block 14. I'll read this to you. One half of the barracks served as inmates' quarters, the other as a sock darning workshop. Between January and March 1945, 163 inmates were lodged here. They were assigned to various labour detachments, such as the camp kitchen, the camp administration, and the sock darning workshop. And here we have a quote from Józef Szklank. He wrote this in 2002 in his memoir. In the block we were assigned to, there was a dormitory and eating area on one side and a sock darning workshop on the other. Even if the rations were abysmal, the work in the warm block did not exhaust us as much as the poor guys who worked in the production of the V1, the V2, or breaking rock to erect the new underground factory halls. The circumstances in the camp, quite bearable at first, worsened from day to day. And here we can see from the NARA, National Archives and Administration, National Archives and Records Administration, block book of the camp senior Roman Drung, with information on the number of occupants in each block, the block seniors and labour detachment in the Dora camp. Barrack 14 is listed at the bottom right. This will be bottom right. There you are, 14. And that's how many people are in 163. Don't know what that is. What looks a bit like a pigsty, but I'm not suggesting it was. Here we are, block 8. Which I'll read to you. The number of occupants in this wooden barrack varied. In the first quarter of 45, it accommodated 314 inmates. They came from Belgium, France, former Soviet Union, Poland. The inmates had to work in various labour detachments, amongst other the so-called Savatsky Commando. As the director of the Mittelbau GmbH planning department, Albin Savatsky was responsible for the deployment of inmates in the production of the A4 rocket. All inmates in the Savatsky Commando were assigned to rocket assembly. The majority of them were electricians, welders, fitters and mechanics. On the 10th of November 1944, the SS transferred inmates they considered qualified from the Buchenwald to the Mittelbau concentration camp, where some were lodged in Block 8, which is here. And there we have a drawing. There we go. Drawing by Carlo Slama, 1945, after liberation. Inmates assembling an A4 rocket in the underground factory under the supervision of German foremen. The final inspection was carried out in chamber 41. There we go. Carlo sounds as though he's an Italian. Lots of Italians, following the surrender at Cassibile on the 8th of September 1943, were sent to for armament production. They were captured POWs, and they were sent to the Reich for to work, above all, in industry. Well, I'm going to have to stop because I've run out of gas.